On the Midland Railway's main line from Derby to Manchester through the Peak District, there was a junction and exchange sidings with a most unusual railway, whose workings hark back to the earliest days of the railways. The railway was the Cromford and High Peak Railway, which ran up the side of the hills in the southern Peak District near Matlock, Derbyshire. It was one of the earliest railways of all, being authorised in 1825 and opened in 1831, predating the main line here by 18 years. Its purpose was to link two canals and provide a through route for freight between the capital of the Lancashire cotton industry, Manchester, and the East Midlands. The canals were the Cromford Canal in Derbyshire and the Peak Forest Canal at Whaley Bridge to the southeast of Manchester. The railway was built in a similar way to a canal, with steep inclines replacing locks, the inclines being joined by railways on the level. Right up to closure, as a through route in 1963, the railway was a curiosity to enthusiasts, as the two major inclines at Sheep Pasture and Middleton were rope work to the end, a practice which had been eliminated in most other parts of the country. The C&HP was a magnet to the Railway Roundabout team, who arranged to film its workings at a particularly interesting time. Austerity tanks ruled on the ground floor level between the transfer sidings and the foot of Sheep Pasture incline. Here wagons were hitched to the tow rope to ascend the 1 in 9 climb. Empty wagons went up and loaded ones came down, as the railway's function was now to move limestone from the quarries at the top of the hills. The semaphore signal had given the shunter at the top the authority to knock the chocks away, and the loaded wagons began to descend. At the bottom, the empties began to ascend. Note the worn pulley wheel. Much of the equipment was still the original Victorian machinery. John Adams in a green jumper remained at the bottom, whilst Pat Whitehouse rode in the ascending wagon. The railway rose approximately 1,000 feet through its use of inclines, which were in constant use all day. In the early days of railways, stationary engines were considered a normal method of locomotion, but there were certain dangers. After 2 wagons ran away in 1888, shot off the tracks at the bottom, over the canal and Midland main line before being smashed to pieces in a field, a catch pit was installed on the incline. It was double-tracked throughout and ran for approximately a mile. Naturally, the wagons arrived at the top and bottom simultaneously, the full wagons at the bottom being drawn away by the austerity tank. At the top, another remarkable tank engine type picked up the empty wagons. This 040 tank was built by British Railways in 1953 to an LMS design of 1932. It worked the short section between the top of Sheep Pasture and the bottom of Middleton inclines. The railway had maintained its independence until 1887, when the London and North Western Railway acquired it. This had little effect on its operations at the western end. The second incline was at Middleton, where the 040 tank pushed the wagons to the foot of the climb for attachment to the cable, which would have taxed the ingenuity of any scout. Once again, a signal was given to the man at the top to release the downcoming wagons, which in this instance were a pair of former London and North Western Railway locomotive tenders descending empty. There were no water facilities on the line, so all water supplies had to be lifted up to the top in these old tenders. The railway also supplied water in this way to factories and quarries and cottages on the uplands. connectivity between Middleton Top and the main part of the railway was perhaps the most famous part of the Cromford and High Peak Railway. Here, the London and North Western had imported some small 060 tanks from another of its absorbed lines, the North London Railway. In 1960, these engines were replaced by further austerities, and the survival of this one engine was all that was needed to bring the cameras here in that year. These engines had worked the line since the 1930s, and the sight of a pair of them rushing Hopton Incline was one to behold. This was the last chance to film it. Hopton Incline had originally been a rope-worked incline like Sheep Pasture and Middleton, but it had been eased out to allow conventional working in 1877. With a maximum gradient of 1 in 14, this was the steepest Adhesion-worked railway in the country. They'd made it. Stalling wasn't unknown. 2 wagons were virtually the limit for a single engine. Note in the background an austerity, waiting to take the train on along the top. Water was precious here, none was wasted. The North London tank went back and was soon to be withdrawn. But that wasn't the end for it. It was preserved.